Welcome to Come Rain or Shine with Dan Cockrell. This is the show where we explore the power of leadership and culture on your organization's success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and of course, we're with Dan Cockrell. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Jody, you're just back from Florida, back to Washington State, eh?
Oh, yes. Just got back last night after a month in Florida. This is perhaps the first time in quite a while I haven't had to adjust my lighting for a Zoom call to make me not look so pale.
You do look pretty tan, actually. I'm impressed.
Yeah, a month in the sun will do that. I was outside as much as possible, soaking it all in, and it was great. And it now helps on Zoom calls, which was the whole point of spending a month in Florida, so I can come back to Washington and not look pale on Zoom.
All right. Well, don't worry. You'll be pale again soon enough.
That is a fact. All right. So I have a quick story not related to Florida. I heard this about Disneyland, that Walt Disney himself took a trip to Switzerland and he sent a postcard back to his Imagineers in Disneyland. On the front was the Matterhorn, and on the back it said, "Make this." Have you heard that, Dan?
Really?
Yeah. That's where the ride, the Matterhorn, came from.
There's no reason not to believe that's a story, because, he traveled Europe extensively and was always looking for ideas and bringing new ideas back. So I believe all of it.
Yeah. And to me, that's just a great story because it's so unreasonable to see the Matterhorn and say, "I want this at Disneyland," and just send the postcard back and say, "Make this." But yet that's why Disneyland, Disney World are so wonderful, because so much of what's done there is unreasonable.
Yeah. He hired creative Imagineers. He hired people who knew what the expectations were, and that he would challenge them. I remember there was one story, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, so we should probably do some research. But he basically went. They had a show they were putting together, and he went and watched it, and he said something like, "Come on, you can do better than that," and left. And he didn't give any detail. And they went and worked on it, and they improved it. And he came back later and said, "Okay, that's it. That's good." So, and it's interesting because usually when you give feedback, you tell people exactly. And he said, "No, you can do better," and left, and left them with that. And they did. So sometimes just challenging people, just saying, "Hey, here it is. Go for it." You get some great results.
I heard a similar story about Henry Kissinger. Someone submitted a report, and I hope I have who this is right. It doesn't matter. The story's still good. But somebody submitted something to Henry Kissinger, and he didn't even read it. He just wrote on the top, "Is this the best you can do?" and gave it back, and they did even better, and he didn't even read it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's one thing about, doing that in the right circumstances, but I think there is something to it, challenging people you work with, challenging people to do better. Because usually, I think there's almost every situation you can improve whatever you're doing. Do you have the time? Do you have the resources to do that? And if you do, why not? Why not push yourself to think more critically about your work?
Well, I think this ties in well to the topic, but I've got two questions for you. First, unrelated to the topic. One, have you ever ridden the Matterhorn at Disneyland?
I have not.
Oh, my goodness.
I've never ridden the Matterhorn, but there are two things I have done. One is I've eaten a lot of Toblerone bars in my day, and it seems like they have a lock at duty-free shops. Every airport I'm in, they're selling Toblerone. If you haven't had Toblerone, it's chocolate with the little nougat pieces inside it. It's really good. And Toblerone is in these little triangles connected together in the shape of the Matterhorn, and the Matterhorn is represented on the box of Toblerone chocolate. So there's another fun fact for you.
I don't think I realized that. But all right, so perhaps someday, Dan, we will get to ride the Matterhorn together. The next question I have, though, and this one is a stretch. Have you ever seen the real Matterhorn?
Well, Jody, it's funny you mention it because I saw it about 10 minutes ago.
Get out of here.
I'm actually in Zermatt, Switzerland, and Valerie she went to Africa. She went to Namibia with her friend Sue and a group of her friend's family, and they're driving around in Africa. And so I said, well, you know what? This is time for a road trip. I'm an only child. I got to go on adventures. So I spent a week with my 89-year-old mother-in-law and just north of Lyon. Spent a great week with her, and we talked. She's got the age of an 89-year-old and the spirit of an 18-year-old. She cooks, she knits, she sews, she gardens, she drives. She's just like a powerhouse. So she does all kinds of stuff. So we spent a great week together. We had lunch together every day and dinner together every evening, and talked about what it was like to live in Europe in 1944. She was 11 years old, and what it was like when the Germans invaded, and what it was like when the American troops arrived. And just the stories she has are just, it's hard to imagine because, I think I've mentioned this before, but the United States has never been invaded. It's hard to imagine another country invading your country, but she remembers all of it. And she has, so as I think I shared on another podcast at one point, maybe 9 months ago, when COVID hit, she's like, look, I lived through World War II in France. So COVID, hold my beer, no big deal. So anyway, I've set off on a 1-week road trip, and I'm up in the Alps right now, working, hiking, enjoying the time here. And I'll be headed back down to see her in about a week. And then Valerie gets back from Africa, hopefully. All her flights were canceled, so I'm trying to rebook everything. And then we're headed back to the U.S. in about a week and a half.
That just sounds like a wonderful trip. It's fun to hear your stories, and so neat that you are at the foot of the Matterhorn practically as we record.
Yeah. And the cool thing about Switzerland, I still got to do some more geography and some more reading. I mean, I came in through Geneva, I go around the lake, then you go into Switzerland and everything's in French. And at some point I came around a turn and all of a sudden everything was in German. And so I'm on the German side of Switzerland now. And so, as I was joking with people, I'm like, before, I'm throwing around some bonjours and some bonjournées, some mercis. You turn the corner and now you're throwing around some dankeschöns and some bitteschöns. And so I don't speak German, but everyone here speaks at least French or English. And so you figure stuff out. You just and Google Translate is my best friend. You put that up against anything and you get an instant translation. So it's helpful.
All right, Dan, one last thing before we get to the topic. If you were going to take a trip somewhere let's just keep it simple. Say you're going somewhere in the United States you'd never been before. What would you do to make your travel experience easier?
Well, you know what? If it was an option, I would have called Magical Vacation Planner to plan a magical vacation in Zermatt. But I don't think they have any packages here yet. But I'm going to talk to them about that. But if I wanted to go to visit Walt Disney World, or even better, go visit the Matterhorn at Disneyland, I would call Magical Vacation Planner and they would make it happen because they know everything there is to know about these trips to theme parks in the U.S. and cruises, and they're experts on that. So I would definitely give them a call.
You can reach Magical Vacation Planner at 407-442-0257. To circle us back, we were talking earlier about Walt Disney sending the postcard of the Matterhorn saying, make this, and other stories of ways to kind of push people to make them improve. That sometimes someone just kind of pushing you, prodding you, saying you can do better leads to success, which takes us right into our topic. Dan has something he thinks is relevant. It's a great topic that he thinks is relevant that we want to talk about. So Dan, I'll just let you go right into it.
Yeah, so this was nice and fresh. Our Perch community that we have now, we ask our members every month what they'd like to talk about or hear about. And once they give us a topic, I do some homework and I put my thoughts together on whatever the topic's going to be. And we all get on and we record it and we leave it for them. And the topic of the last one we did about 2 weeks ago was finding success. What is success? How can you be successful? And boy, I thought, wow, what a simple question. But then the more I thought about it, I kind of put some bullet points together. And once again, I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm just saying this is my point of view. It's my podcast and I can say what I want. So as I thought about this, and this is going to tie in, I think, some things we've talked around before, but I think before you even start thinking about success, you have to let go of every conventional thing that you naturally would pop up in your mind, because society has told us what success is, or our parents have told us what success is in many cases, or we've just learned through it by just being around people, and people say, oh, that guy's successful or that lady's successful. When you say, well, why? Well, look at them. They're they have all that money, or they have that title and they've had that job, and so we don't talk about people being fulfilled or really having, lived a great life. It's about success. And so I think it's important, really, you should, in my opinion, sit down and define for yourself what success is and what failure is. Because if you let everyone else define it for you, you'll never be happy. You'll never get there. And there's something about success that's like, okay, well, now I've gotten where I am. Do I stop now? Do I keep going? Am I supposed to work harder? Am I supposed to get more stuff? What does that look like? So there's some things thoughts I put through here. I've talked before about, I call them the 3 buckets that I've used as my virtual scorecard that I've thought about every day for probably about 20 years. And, my buckets are taking care of myself. And I know people are sick of hearing this, but I'm not going to stop talking about it. Taking care of myself first, before my family, before my job, before everything. Making sure that I'm exercising, making sure that I'm getting enough or the right diet, getting enough sleep, managing stress the right way, and putting things into perspective, knowing what my values are. And if I can get centered, if I can know that I'm feeling confident, I'm feeling healthy, I just get so much more done. My dad has talked before, he's said this multiple times, is the reason most people procrastinate is they just don't feel good. You wake up, your stomach doesn't feel good, you feel lethargic, you just don't feel good about your body, you don't feel good about yourself, you don't have the confidence, you're not feeling centered. And it affects your life, it affects your family, it affects how well you do in your job. So I think that just continues to be really something that's important. The next thing is family and friends, delivering on family and friends, your responsibilities. Do you call your family on their birthdays? Do you empty the dishwasher? Are you patient with your kids? Are you really thinking about how to teach your kids the right things as they grow up? Are you paying attention to the small details? That's what kind of defines success for me when it comes to my family and friends. And lastly is career. How am I doing at work and doing that? So for me, unless I can get all 3 right, I don't think I'm successful. I need to be able to balance those things. And, more and more as I get older, I realize that the work piece is probably less and less important. Doing what you love is important. I've had jobs and I've loved what I've done most of my career. And there's points where I'm like, wasn't fulfilled. But we spend so much time at work, we have to find that. But I'll tell you, once you leave that job, I left Disney. I still know a lot of people there. But as we talked about before, the place keeps running. They didn't close just because I left. So, family and friends are, if you have the right ones, those are forever. And taking care of yourself is a big one. So those are some thoughts around success. I think there's another piece of this when we talk about failures. I think when we hear the word failure, we think about big things. Like I didn't get into the college I wanted to get into, or I didn't get the promotion, or I lost the big race. I think, we all have big failures in life, but I think life isn't about the big failures. It's the small failures. If you can start to really think about the small failures, and I would say every day we have failures. And, the quote I used on our community session, I just watched The Patriot again with Mel Gibson. It's a great movie about the War of Independence, and that the advice he gives to his 2 little boys who have to go out because their older brother was taken by the British was, okay, what did we talk about when we talked about shooting a musket? And they said, aim small, miss small. And so he said, when it comes to that, you need to get your standards so you're really honed in on what your target is, very small. So even if you miss, you're still going to be close to what you were aiming for. So I think there's something around holding ourselves accountable for all the small failures every day. And you don't have to be, totally focused on this all the time. But, I took a run this morning and, there's some mountains around here, as you probably know, and there's a lot of up. And so I haven't been at altitude for about a month and a half, and up was hard. So I ended up walking a lot of the way, and I'm like, man, I planned to run this whole thing, and now I'm walking. And in my mind, I'm like, can I run a little more? Can I run to that next tree and then take a breath and walk for a while? And then I can run to that next piece. So I think a lot of times is these small failures, if you can really start holding yourself accountable to deliver on these things, you start to get better with your life because you're not looking for those big things. Every day you're holding yourself accountable to deliver the things you believe in. And I have a couple more, but I know, Jody, you're always taking notes. So I'll stop there and see what comments or questions you may have.
One of the first things I thought of, Dan, as you're talking about this, I wrote something down that if you have, so small failures help you get more successful. That's one of the things I gathered from what you were talking about. But often people try to avoid failure. No sudden moves. I don't want to get noticed. I don't want to mess up. I don't want my boss to get mad at me. So they take the least risky route. But what happens if people try to avoid failure too much?
Yeah, well, that is a really interesting one, because you can avoid failure, but if you avoid failure, you're also avoiding improvement. You're avoiding growth, and you're avoiding the opportunities to get better at things. For me, this was, just going on a road trip and taking off by myself and coming into, the German side of Switzerland. I'm like, all right, I could have said, I'm going to stay in France. I know the language. I know the people. I can read the signs, and I'm not going to go to a place where it just feels uncomfortable. But now that I've been here, I'm like, yeah, I can figure this out. And next time I come, I'm going to have an even better time, because I know what hiking trails are, and I know where to ride the bike, and I know how to do that. And so I've gained knowledge in my knowledge, personal knowledge of geography. So the quote I love, and I don't think anyone said this, but I wrote this down: doing and failing is not failing. Not doing is failing. And, not trying, in my mind, is failing. If you don't try to speak that new language, if you don't try to connect with someone, when it's karaoke night and you decide not to step up and try. Now, a lot of people would say, well, karaoke night's not going to help me with my life. But there's every time you have a chance to say yes or say no. And I just think people should say yes more often and go try new things. And it doesn't mean you're going to have bad judgment. It doesn't mean go do dangerous things. It's going to put your life in danger. But talk to that person sitting next to you on the bus. Talk to that person on the plane. When someone asks, we have a really tough assignment, we need someone to lead it, raise your hand. Now, by raising your hand, you now have an opportunity that you're going to fail. You're going to fall short. But you also have a chance you're going to learn something new, and it's going to help you along the way. I'll tell you, the 19 jobs I had at Disney, there was not one job I stepped into that I wasn't afraid of failing. Every job I went into, it was a new line of business or it was a promotion. And going into it, I always thought to myself, boy, I hope I can do this. I had that little self-doubt, and I would apply the things I know work, get to know people, spend time with the employees and the cast members and work side by side with them, find out what needs to be done, where you can add the most value, and things would work themselves out. But it's easy to say no and sit back and just kind of never be in a tough situation. But I think if you can learn to embrace those tough situations and thrive in failing, and thrive in not being able to get all the way to where you want to get, you're always going to be successful because you're trying. And for me, that's what life's about. It's trying. Sometimes you make it and sometimes you don't. And those times, then you get to try again at some other point.
I know the times I could have failed, or somebody could have said no and possibly made me feel bad for saying no, or however you want to look at that, have worked out really well for me. For example, Dan and I never would have been connected had I not been bold enough to first time ask his dad to be on my podcast, and then ask his dad, do you want to do a podcast together? And that's how Dan and I got connected. And now we do this show and other things together. And I could have said no. Lee will say no. So here's one of the things a point I want to make, Dan, is I try to not say no for other people. I let them say no for themselves. And I see that I see that happen where people will say, no, Dan will say no. I'm just not going to ask. Well, I let Dan say no for himself, because you just might get surprised by a yes.
Yeah. I saw that so many times in my career where I heard people say, well, what? And they say, well, I'd never get a chance to meet someone to get mentored or get to introduce myself. I said, well, why don't you call people and call their office and set up time? Well, they're in a high position. They're an executive. They'll probably say no. I'm like, all right. So, and if they do, then go talk to somebody else. And if they say yes, go see them. So I think a lot of times people aren't afraid that others aren't going to help them out. I think they're afraid in themselves to ask, because they don't know what they're going to ask. They don't know what they're going to say. What if I get there and they ask me questions I don't know anything about? We get intimidated by things we don't know. But everyone's human. Everyone deals with stuff. And there's no reason just to lean forward and try. Even today, and it's really becomes a habit. You have to make it a habit. So today I woke up this morning, I got this little $99 Airbnb room So I'm like, I'm not going to work from here today. I want a nice place to be. So I Googled co-work space in Zermatt, Switzerland. And there's one hotel that converted part of their lounge to a co-work space. I was like, all right, bingo. So I went there and it was like $25 for a half day. So I sat down, they had great internet. They had a really nice lounge. I was by myself. There's free coffee. So I'm already making all my money back because I drink a lot of coffee, and a cup of coffee here is like $8. So there was a manager who I saw walking around, and I didn't know who he was. And finally he came up and he said, well, how are you enjoying our workspace? I said, it's great. And we started chatting, and he was the general manager of the hotel. And it's probably, 20 rooms, boutique hotel. So we talked for a while. And I mean, while I was sitting there, I heard him speak like 4 different languages. He was speaking English to a guest, and then he was speaking German, then he was speaking French, and I think he spoke Spanish. I was pretty impressed by him. And we started talking. He said, yeah, this is a family-owned hotel, and we're really trying to, find a differentiator. So we're going to start packages where people can come and, do stretching in the morning and do a lot of health things. And we want to be different and do these packages. I said, well, it's funny you mentioned that. I said, I worked for Disney for 26 years. My wife and I now do leadership seminars. And if you're ever interested in having a package here, we would love to come here and do some classes in the hotel around leadership, around time management or communication or whatever topic you'd like. Disney's a good hook. This is a beautiful hotel. I gave him my business card. He said, look, I'll talk to the owner and we'll take a look. Now, in my mind, there's probably a 0.1% chance they're actually going to call me and we're going to do something together, because I don't expect it to happen, but it might. And what if they do call me? What if the owner is a Disney fanatic? And ironically, there was a Mickey Mouse kind of pop art painting in the lounge. So I'm like, there's a little nod. And maybe he's going to show it and they're going to say, yeah, let's try something. They're going to call me, and all of a sudden we're going to be coming to Zermatt, Switzerland in the winter or the summer to go maybe teach some classes. I don't expect it to happen. But if I hadn't talked to him, if I hadn't presented that, if I hadn't given him my card, it definitely wouldn't have happened. So how many opportunities every single day do you have to interact with someone that is just going to be a new relationship that may or may not lead to something else? Once again, it's about planting seeds. If you're not afraid to work hard and plant seeds every day in the ground and water them and keep them going, most of them aren't going to sprout, but the ones that are may be the difference for you of meeting maybe your next husband or wife, or getting a job opportunity, or finding a new path in your life. And I just think that the world's so random. And if you can create more random opportunities for yourself, I think that leads to success. And not everything's going to go. I just think people don't want to exert all the energy because they want every moment to be successful. And that's just not the way life works.
I have found, Dan, maybe you've experienced something similar, but in having my own business, doing what I do, I have found that when you plant a seed, you usually don't get any return, any bounce back from that for 9 months. So if you aren't doing it today, you're going to feel it down the road. So I'm like, Dan, I'm always pitching ideas, planting seeds. Most of them don't come to anything, but you've got to put a lot of them out there, and you will find 9 months, 10 months, 2 years. I have one popping up now, Dan, that's 2 years in the making. And if the seed hadn't been planted 2 years ago, it wouldn't be where it is today. So Dan's right. You've just got to keep planting the little seeds. Most of them don't come back, but some of them do.
Yep. Yeah. So it's not about any big one successful moment, one big failing moment. It is a lifestyle. I think success is a lifestyle. Figure out what's important to you. Figure out how you want to be in your life and be that way all the time, and pay attention, and those things will happen. So I have, talk about small successes. I mean, getting here and getting a train ticket and getting up and finding the Airbnb. I'm like, yes, success. I thought maybe it wouldn't happen. When I was at my cousin's house the past week, I was baking every morning. They have a little inn they run. And I'm like, I'm going to get up at 6. I'm going to bake and have fresh baked goods for that week for all of their clientele. For me, that was fun. I'm on I'm vacation and working, but I was working and helping them out. Spending time with my mother-in-law. I've never spent that much one-on-one time with her because Valerie, we're always together, and I really got to talk to her and ask her about things I never got to talk to her about. For me, that was a huge success. I just thought that was such a cool thing to be able to do. So that not only is it about these small things, but having gratitude and paying attention to those things. You don't have to have these big successful moments. It's about all those little interactions you have and appreciating other people and what they've done and learning from them.
Well, Dan, I know I distracted us. You had 2 more points left on what you were going to talk about.
I did. Well, I hit one of them, which was doing and failing is not failing, not doing is failing. So I think that's a big one. And you can see, I know that Wayne Gretzky has a great quote about that. You know, you're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I know Michael Jordan has a great quote about how many times he got the ball in the final seconds and missed. And, you know, he just talked about that, but we know how often he actually made it. So having, you know, take the weight and the responsibility of trying. I think the other point I'd make is that not only is failing not trying, repeatedly doing the same things that have negative consequences. That's failure for me. Not learning from the things, you know, you keep doing things over and over again that don't work, that cause harm, that cause bad relationships, that cause you to deliver on your goals. I think if we don't learn from those, because people say, well, if you make a mistake, you know, forgive yourself and move on. Like, yeah, you forgive yourself, but you got to change. You can't just keep making the same mistake over and over and over again. And when we get under pressure, when we get emotional, we default to our real selves. And that's problematic. You know, one of the things that I constantly, with Valerie and I working so closely together now, as soon as she gives me feedback on something, I just instantly feel defensive. And I don't like feeling that way. And for the first couple of years we worked together, it was obvious. My body language, the way I responded, I still get defensive, but I've learned now, okay, Dan, why are you doing this? Why are you getting defensive right now? Don't react that way. Just calm down and listen and then respond. And you may respond in a way that's defensive, or you may say, you know what, you have a good point, or let me think about that. But you have to get, you know, control over yourself. And like I said, I think we all default to these, I call them these fatal flaws. And if we can get better at recognizing those in ourselves and changing our response, I think that's a huge growth opportunity. And everyone has them. And if you can figure out what they are, and once you figure out what they are, it can really help you be much better in life, whatever your shortcoming is.
I have 2 quick points to make, Dan, before we end. The first is Dan mentioned the Perch community, which we have such a great time in that community. If you're interested in finding out more, go to dancockrell.com/perch. And the other is, this is a timely episode for us to do, Dan, because on my own show, the Jody Mayberry Show, which that's an unintended plug, but I'll take it. I've been working on an episode about missing out, the fear of missing out on all these other things. But if you define what success is for you, you're not going to get someone else to make you feel like you're missing out. So for me, a big one is time with my family. I only have Dan has experienced this because all of his kids are out of the house. I only have so much time with them, and I'm fine missing out on other opportunities for the next few years if it means getting more time with my kids. So there may be a pull sometimes to go to this conference, to speak here, to do that. I know I probably pass up making a lot more money than I could, but that's nothing compared to the time with my kids. So if you can do what Dan said and define for yourself what success is, you just don't feel the pull of, oh, I'm missing out on this, because you get to do what you think is successful.
That's a great point. When you know what the goal is, you know what your values are, decisions are so much easier to make, because you don't have to go in your mind about feeling envious of someone else who's getting to do that, or feeling bad that you're, like to your point, missing out. It's like, no, these are my values. And because my values are there, yeah, I'm missing out, but it's not bothering me because I know who I am, and I know what's important. And it's a great feeling when you have that.
Yes, it sure is. Well, Dan, this has been a great conversation, and we haven't been together much because you've been traveling, I've been traveling. So Dan and I have, I feel like we've only recorded one episode in the last month plus, but here we are. It's good to be back with you, Dan, and I'm glad you got to see the Matterhorn. That's pretty exciting. So next on the list is to ride the Matterhorn. We'll correct that sometime.
All right, I'll put it on the list. I don't know if that's on the bucket list. The real Matterhorn was on the bucket list. Maybe this is on a little pale list.
The sand pail list. All right.
The sand pail list. There you go.
That sounds good. All right. Thank you so much, Dan. And thank you for listening to Come Rain or Shine.